to all. I, Dr. Shashi Chawla, teacher in charge, Department of Microbiology, Gargi College, extend a very warm welcome to our esteemed speaker, Dr. Tavpritesh Sethi, our principal ma'am, Dr. Pramila Kumar, and all the participants who decided to connect with us. Today's webinar is a talk on fighting pandemics with artificial intelligence. Now, actually, principal ma'am, she informed me that she has a meeting at this time to attend and will try to join whenever possible. But she has extended her good wishes to us for this webinar. So now, before I introduce our speaker for the day, I would like to make some humble requests to all the participants. The first is that please keep your mic and camera off at all the times for better bandwidth. And the second is that please type your questions in the chat box and we will take them up on your behalf. So these are two requests, please follow them. Now, with immense pleasure, I introduce our speaker of the day, Dr. Tavpritesh Sethi. Presently, Dr. Sethi is an assistant professor of computational biology at Indraprastha Institute of Information and Technology, Delhi, which we know as IIITD. Now, he calls himself a physician scientist and an innovator in the area of digital health, which is very much justified by his qualifications. He is an MBBS doctor who's done his degree from Government Medical College, Amritsar, and then that was followed by PhD, which he did from CSIR, Institute of Genomics and Integrative Biology. He is also a developer of Wash Karo app. So that way he justifies whatever he's saying. Now, besides that, Dr. Sethi is also a member of Technology Innovation Group constituted by Delhi government for COVID-19 management via IT platforms. He is also a fellow of the Wellcome Trust and DBT Alliance at AIIMS. So it's really wonderful to have Dr. Sethi to this webinar, and I welcome you. So you can start now, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for that very kind information, for the introduction. I'll just start sharing my screen and we'll start from there.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much for having me here to speak about our work on digital health. So, all right, I'm just sharing my screen. I think I'll have to switch when we go to the web interface, but is my screen visible now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes,
yeah,
sir.
it's visible.
Thank you so much. So,
Yes,
yeah.
sir.
Perfect. So thank you again. The theme that we discussed, I think,
Yes, sir.
First of all, Dr. Kriti Tyagi and Dr. Shashi. So it was my, it's an honor to be speaking to the audience from Gargi College. I thought I would keep the topic to fighting pandemics with artificial intelligence because I think that's this is a time when we are collectively as a country and around the globe, we are seeing increasing requirement of data analytics and AI to guide our decisions because the current pandemic, which is the COVID-19, is forcing us to really think with data because of the enigma that is. So much of enigma around the disease, so little understanding, policy measures that need more data backing. So
Okay.
I thought that this would be an appropriate topic for speaking about to this audience, which I believe is an audience of young colleagues as well as my colleagues from college. So essentially, I'll be talking about 2 or 3 different applications that lie in this area. The first is Washkaro, which is an artificial intelligence powered infodemic management application. So when the epidemic started spreading, or the pandemic started spreading across the globe, the information about the pandemic actually spread faster than the pandemic itself. So the rate at which the information and the misinformation was spreading was much higher. And that's exactly what's called as infodemic. And incidentally, I'll just talk a little bit about why the name Washkaro, what was the background of Washkaro, and how did it become an infodemic management app for COVID. So we had been working on this idea for about a year or so, where we realized that public health can actually be improved by delivering interventions, which are digital interventions, by through the use of AI and making it accessible to people. And I'll come to that. So it was mostly about WASH, which is water, sanitation, and hygiene. And when this pandemic actually started, we already had the Washkaro app on Google Play Store, and we already were writing up the paper for that. So we repurposed the app for the COVID-19 pandemic, and as you would know, Karo is Hindi. So basically, it was a perfectly, I would say, repurposed app for hand wash, sanitation, hygiene for COVID. But that's the main mission of Washkaro. The idea being that a lot of information, professional information, guidelines are available at WHO, also at CDC, also by the Government of India, and various governments across the world. But these guidelines do not reach people in their own language at the right time. So right information at the right time to the right people in the right format. That's the basic idea. So this is actually before any of the other apps actually started. This was 14th of March, when I think a week and a half before the lockdown started. And as I said, COVID had just started spreading in India. We did not have any vetted sources of information that people are asking, where should we look at this? And we realized that perhaps there is a role for AI in being able to do that. So basically, what we did was we exactly started thinking about repurposing our previous Washkaro pipelines using AI to address this issue of right information to the right people in the right format at the right time. So right information means that AI can actually match the information that is coming out there, for example, everyday news, with vetted information, for example, what WHO says. So it is impossible for humans to go through a lot of information and then vote, but AI can do this at a much faster pace. And then that's right information to the right people. We thought that this all English information, written information, perhaps is not the best way to reach out to people. The best way to reach out to people is in their own local languages in audio formats, not written or not read formats. So again, we used AI for all the processing and conversion from text to speech, and I'll come to that as well, to deliver bite-sized audios in Hindi as well as in English to people. And we were targeting WASH in general is more relevant to when it is delivered to, for example, mothers in their own language, because we know that it prevents diseases like diarrhea, malaria, all childhood disorders. And that's true for COVID as well. And so that's the right format, and at the right times means we update it daily to match it against the current guideline. So at that time, it was about, so we submitted this on March 14th, came online on March 16th. It's a preprint. We have submitted the paper, it's under review. Essentially, the preprint talks about a machine learning application for raising WASH awareness in the times of COVID-19 pandemic. You can go and read this paper. Now we have a lot more authors, and I'll come to that why, because as we were developing the applications, a lot more features got added to the application and also the paper. So now there's more authors, but essentially this is the machine learning component, which is called On Air. So On AIR, which is On AI, and so we decided to use this AI backend or the AI pipeline into an Android app. The reason being that, again, to reach out to people, you need the right medium. And Android, if you look at it, the blue bars here are the share of Android market in India. So essentially, that's why we chose Android. But right now, it's also we're also working on iOS. Actually, this app is also not adopted, but as a different name, but a similar form is going to be announced perhaps today or tomorrow by the Delhi government, because we are on the technical innovation group. That's a separate app. It's called CCD, or COVID Care Delhi. So that's also in iOS and Android. But the right hand side picture is just, I would say, the outline of how the Watchkar app looks like. So you can see information in Hindi as well as contact tracing. I'll come to that, all that later, symptom tracking, etc. So we kept it really academic. We are an academic lab. We are not a company. Our job is to do research and then to see if that research can actually be usefully delivered to clinical good or to public good or social good. So all my lab's previous research has been in the space of ICU. I'm not going to talk about that. You can go online and check that out as well, where we build predictive models using machine learning and AI for ICUs. And how can we predict which babies, which children are going to crash in the next 24 hours? So that is the kind of work that we have been doing, using different AI models that make use of images, that make use of text, that make use of signals. So since we have an academic background, we also wanted to keep this Watchkar, and we never thought that Watchkar would gain a lot of acceptance, because we thought it's a research app. It'll help us more than people to conduct research studies, but I'll come to the numbers later. So we kept it really academic by breaking it into how can we make a public health intervention, which is how do we identify what is a problem at hand, which means that there are community problems, there is a need for mHealth, we need to use AI and ML at the back end and natural language processing so that we can reach out to people in their own language, use AI for doing that to deliver solutions. So that's the identify problem. How do we simplify all this? Because if we talk about AI to people, they are probably going to get driven away by AI. So first of all, how do we really reach out in languages that people would adopt? How do we make it multilingual? How can we create audio-visual content? As I said, the audience, as we started out with the Watchkar app, water, sanitation, hygiene, was mothers who need to be reached out for childhood infections. That was our initial use case, because except I work in the ICUs, we saw that a lot of readmissions in the pediatric ICUs for children were happening from the walled part of Delhi. We thought there's a lot of hygiene issues in Delhi. How do we create an app for them which can guide them with the right information for preventing sepsis and coming back to ICU? That is the genesis, as I said before. So how do we create audiovisual content, counter misinformation, was the simplify component. Then amplify. So this is called the ISAC pipeline. So how do we amplify this? Basically, Android app, creating an Android app was the amplification protocol, and then also amplify the signal from noise. That how can we, as we get more people who use the app, can we really get feedback from the people to really amplify what is right, what is wrong? So I'll come to that as well. And then public health surveys, symptom self-assessment, and risk assessment that will amplify the user base. And then quantify. How do we really then finally come to a conclusion that really there is some evidence that we were able to reach out to the target population, There was improvement using AI, not in the public health space, because that takes, I think, years to really figure out, or in the COVID space, it might take shorter time. But that needs, I would say, for example, labs like Arogya Setu, which can be rolled out on the national level. But I'll speak about on those plans as well as on how we are doing that. But how do we quantify some of the robustness features of AI, and how do we conduct demographic analysis, usage statistics, and health analysis, etc. So the broad pipeline is that we, as we can see here, there's guidelines from WHO. There are news, daily news, which are why news? Because people connect with news. People don't connect with WHO guidelines. People don't connect with a one-page bulletin which is released by the government or the ICMR. People connect with what they like to see on a daily basis, which is dynamic. So we thought that that is really important, and then pick news as a medium, summarize those news, and summarize the WHO guidelines, and match these two together using AI, compare and generate similarity scores, and then assess the quality of the match using human intelligence, which is called human in the loop AI, and then basically deliver these insights translated in various different languages using text to speech. First, basically text to text, and then text to speech. And finally, also incorporate user feedback. So for example, if you read something on Roshkaro, you will get an upvote or a downvote saying that was this article relevant to the current, for example, COVID season. That's not happening right now because I'll come to that as well. But that was the idea. So the user flow was, it's a human AI collaboration. So these are a little bit more technical details. I don't want to bog the students down with a lot of NLP or AI technical details, but for those who are interested, we do something which is called extractive text summarization using text plans. And then word-to-vec methods, which is just as we have models which can, for example, predict. For example, Google, when you start typing a word, it starts predicting what is going to come next. Those are all word models, right? So using word models to really understand some of the language, and that's where the extractive text summarization part comes in. And then construct some similarity scores. Once I've understood the content using a model for the news, I've understood the content from the WHO. Now I want to use a similarity score to match these. And then the technical details for the text-to-speech, we use the Google text-to-speech translate, Google Translate engine. So once we finally got these matched pairs, 8 people from our lab, including people who are from the medical background. I have a bunch of students who are finishing up or finished their graduation from AIIMS. They're active members of our lab, because I also work very closely with AIIMS at the Department of Pediatrics, as I said. So we evaluated these models. As I said in the previous slide, we actually constructed 13 different models, as you can see in this table. Word-to-vec embeddings, GloVe embeddings, Google sentence encoder models, different forms of similarity matrix, different forms of pre-processing and TF-IDF, and then chose the model which majority of humans said that this is, 2,500 news WHO pairs were assessed, and on these 2,500 pairs of articles and news, where we got the maximum concordance, those were the word-to-vec models plus the cosine distance, which I showed in the last slide, and we took these forward. So that was the kappa score on the right, which is a metric for which is used in something called inter-observer variability. That how much do 8 humans or 10 humans or whatever number of humans agree with each other on a particular score. So then we assessed I mean, so we rolled out this app. This app actually got about 5,000 users, which was very surprising to us because very rarely academic apps really get used. Mostly those are rolled out to friends and family or students, and then essentially we get some survey forms, typically 100 to 100, 250 or 300 people at most, and then we basically conduct some research with it. But we were very happy to see about 5,000 users. A lot of media houses found this useful. The Delhi government found this useful. So basically, our engagement started there. But the most interesting thing in the research side, I think, as we got more user base, we could start understanding if our AI engine actually was improving. And that's what we show on the left-hand side, that the days since user labeling, you can see the relevance and irrelevance count. The green is relevant, the red is irrelevant. So the relevance scores actually started going up, irrelevant articles started going down. How was this achieved? By people giving feedback. So this is human in a loop AI. People who can actually use the app, mark relevant or irrelevant, our AI learns whether we need to improve, what is the changes that we need to make without any human interventions, and then basically we get more relevant. On the right hand side, we can see that we were very encouraged to see that if you look at the male to female ratio, and also look at, although we see that lesser females were using the app than males, but if you look at the bars, right, the red is Hindi, the green is English. More females were using the app in Hindi than males, which means that we were probably reaching out to, as we discussed earlier, we were reaching out to people to in their languages, especially because if you teach a female and the mother, the literacy rates in India are clearly different. So we definitely need to reach out to more females in Hindi or other local languages, because that's the point of intervention for any water sanitation to really be able to be effective. So more than males, water sanitation hygiene, if you teach a mother, the baby's health or the child's or the family's, the entire family's health is safeguarded a lot. So we saw that perhaps was the case. We got some more requests, we built more features, more people volunteered, our team became larger with the volunteers from AIMS. As I said, more people, more students from AIMS joined. We built something called a symptom tracker. So these will become more and more important as lockdown opens in the next few days. More and more of people, I mean us, will have questions. If I develop a symptom, is it really dangerous? What do we do about it? So WHO has some guidelines, and we use those guidelines to create a symptom tracker to be used by people. That can give at least an indication of where we are. And we analyze these data as well. I'm not showing that on the slide here, but one of them, for example, the ISAC, the quantify, a couple of things that I showed in the last slide were also quantified. But we also quantified how many people, for example, had severe respiration, for example, severe ARI. So the proportions of people. So we get a sense of what is happening in the population. We get those analytics as well. A very interesting part of this, which is controversial, I'll spend about 5 minutes on this because I think a lot of you will ask this question, perhaps, because of a lot of controversy around the globe about contact tracing. So contact tracing started out, I mean, most of you know about the Aarogya Setu app, which is a contact tracing app. So we had built contact tracing in our app way before basically any of the other apps were open sourced. We open sourced it as well right from the start. All codes are open source. We were inspired from the Singapore government's app, which is called Trace Together. So at that time, Trace Together was not open source. We thought that we should be doing something similar. We should be building in this technology into Washkaro as well. So that was a part of Washkaro pretty early. But let me talk about contact tracing and why this is important. And I'm very happy that we are doing contact tracing to some extent in India with whatever app. It's immaterial. So contact tracing means that it does not, how does it prevent the spread of the disease? It, for example, if a person X comes with contact with a person Y, and let's say the person X was infected, we cannot do anything about person Y other than quarantining. But we can do something about person Y not coming in contact with any more people. So that's the idea behind contact tracing. So we know that there is already one step of contact that has happened. And that is why we need to reach out to enough number of people, at least 60 to 70%, to be able to limit this second order contact and quarantine. So this needs to be, unless this is actually done at a very large scale, we will not be able to, contact tracing will not be useful, to put it very simply. Now the second thing about contact tracing is, how do we do it? Do we need to sacrifice privacy of individuals? So not necessarily. The word contact tracing is some sort of a misnomer. It's not a misnomer in all the apps, because there are some apps which, when they started out, they were using GPS, which means that they could trace. But in the original sense, for example, Trace Together from Singapore and our app, what we did was we right from the first day, and now also Arogya Setu, we said that we will take privacy very seriously. We will use Bluetooth technology instead of GPS, because GPS can track people, whereas Bluetooth technology can, and there's something called BLE, which is Bluetooth Low Energy, and a Bluetooth advertising protocol, that if I'm carrying a phone which is running the same app, and then the person nearby is carrying the same phone, is carrying a phone with the same app, my phone can advertise without revealing my identity. So we send out some randomly generated addresses from my phone, which do not reveal who I am. But those random addresses can advertise to nearby phones what is my status. So, and who knows what is my status? Only the government can know what is my status. So I can know what is my status. So you cannot know my status. So, but from a central database here, where the information about who is infected is known. So if the central database has my information updated as, let's say, COVID positive, then the addresses, when they get broadcast to my nearby range, Bluetooth range, they basically pick up that contact, that there is an infected person in your near vicinity. Because it's a random address that's sent out, so it is privacy enabled. And we are not using GPS, so that's why we are not actually tracing people, right? So that's the idea behind contact tracing. So we did this in our Wash Karo app. That's the basic idea behind Arogya Setu app as well. The privacy concerns about any app actually are more about the privacy of this central database. So remember, we cannot do contact tracing. Wash Karo cannot do contact tracing because we are not authority. We don't have the contact information. What we can do is we can provide the technology, and that's what we did. But we used it not to call it contact tracing because we don't have the contact information. We called it social distancing, physical distancing. That I don't even need to know that am I really close to a positive person. That's a good thing, but at least I can start by keeping physical distance from other people. So since we were not authorized to do contact tracing, we were not a government app. So we did something which looks like this, that you are, please maintain social distancing because you may be at risk. So again, this was when the Delhi government really thought that this could be useful, and I'll come to some of the features for the official app for that. But as I said, we kept Washkaro as an academic line, which we wanted to keep free and academic development, so that we can develop it in whatsoever way we like. So some of the things that, for example, we would want to add, I'll show those later. So we also added Mythbusters to it. So here is an example where we are showing that if an article is in Hindi, you can listen to it as an audio, and then you can mark right or wrong. Whether was it, you can read the WHO text or listen to it, and then the Hindi text, and then you can mark whether it was relevant or irrelevant. So it can give you some of these some alerts, and also it gives notifications every 2 hours to wash your hands, also self-assessment, and something that we recently launched, it is called the Satya chatbot. Because if you've used any of the chatbots, the WHO chatbot, be it the chatbot within Arogya Setu or the Delhi government chatbot, all these are more like IVR systems, like press 1 to get information in Hindi. What it does is it then dumps you with the PDF, and you go home and read all the PDF. That is not a chatbot. The chatbot is supposed to give us some conversational answers. So we thought to make it more human, more conversational. So again, we used AI to make it more conversational. So you can ask questions like, what zone is Delhi in? Or, for example, how many cases in, let's say, Fazilka, or whatever. Or essentially asking things like, can garlic prevent COVID? Or can I get coronavirus infection from my cat? So all those kind of conversational answers are available. So this was the time when Google updated its policies. And it said that essentially only government authorized apps will be allowed on Google Play Store. So every app including Washkaro, which was not government authorized, was taken down. And we appealed. We provided documents, and we are working with the government. So now our appeal has been considered. So Washkaro will be up on the Google Play Store hopefully soon, but without the COVID information. Because as I said, Washkaro initially was a water sanitation hygiene app, but now I think the policy does not allow us to have the COVID information, so we will change these chatbots. But if you still are interested in trying it out, you can still download it from my lab's website. Here is a link, and I can send that across. So it is hosted on a lab. You can download the APK, and you can install it. It's also open source, so software developers can actually go and see what is happening in the backend. So there is no hidden information there. So you can actually explore that and still use it. But going forward, maybe when we get, it will have a different availability on our under a different name on our lab webpage. So, and you can also look at the videos. The link which I can share on the Satya chatbot. How does it answer questions within Washkaro? So that was about Washkaro. I think I've taken about half an hour, which was one of the major chunks of the use of AI in what we have been doing in the last couple of months for COVID. But I also want to talk a little bit more about what other things that we have been doing in the last couple of months for COVID, because the title was Fighting Pandemics with AI, not just fighting pandemics with an app, right? So one of the other challenges that we face is that there is a deluge of data information out there. And as I said to begin with, COVID is an enigma. I mean, one day you hear something about hydroxychloroquine, the next day you see another report. These are so controversial to the extent that people who have published evidence against the use of hydroxychloroquine are actually getting death threats in countries like Brazil. So, point being that there's so much controversy and so much literature out there that we don't know how to make sense of, we thought that there is again providing some interactive AI-driven interfaces to people, to researchers, to policymakers, to clinicians would be of use. So here is basically a AI pipeline that we developed, which we call COVID NLP. This is also currently under review, but the preprint is already out there. It is available on medRxiv, which is a web application for distilling the systemic implications of COVID-19 pandemic with natural language processing. Again, the idea is very similar. We are looking at natural language processing, and I think I will have to stop my screen share and actually. I will stop my screen share and share my web screen to just give a demo of what it does.
Hello?
Yeah, I am just sharing my screen. Okay, just a second. I think I. There we go. Sorry about the delay. I think I hope everybody is able to see our. Sorry. So I hope everybody is able to see the screen, which is the COVID NLP word embeddings dashboard. So this is actually more than 14,000. Again, the background of this is more than 14,000 articles which have been peer reviewed and maintained as a database at WHO. They have been analyzed. So the word embedding space that I was mentioning earlier, this is how the word embedding space looks like. And these are all COVID related articles, not just any article. So you can actually, for example, look at some of these. Actually, I can just type something here, for example, pneumonia. Then I can look at what is a word space. So when these articles articles are published, some words are in the vicinity of other words. And the word embedding models actually let us figure those out and help us construct summaries. For example, pneumonia, the nearest points in this original space that we are seeing here is atypical pneumonia, etiology, again, unusual pneumonia, unexplained pneumonia, things like that. You can look at things like hydroxychloroquine. So there we go. The words that are closely in the space of hydroxychloroquine are remdesivir, chloroquine, antimalarial profiles, things like that, right? So you can actually see. You can actually see what are the neighboring terms of a particular word that you are looking to search. You can also, for example, as I said, there are about 14,000 peer-reviewed research papers which are maintained at WHO. So you can look at, for example, pneumonia, as I said earlier, and then you can, it will give you what are the summarizations. Again, just as we did summarizations in Wash Karo, we did summarizations here which talk about the summary of articles. So if somebody needs to quickly summarize what are the COVID articles talking about pneumonia in these days. It can quickly summarize some of these things. It can also, for example, give you a trend of words that are present in these articles. And then it can also give you something called word algebra, which is an experimental feature. This is very new. So just as we do models which make predictions, Word models, as I said earlier, just the way Google does word models, you can ask word algebra questions. For example, king minus man plus woman. So the model is supposed to learn that the answer should be queen. Because king minus man plus woman, the answer should be queen. So you can actually do this kind of word algebra. Yeah, for example, if I wanted to look at mm, uh, enter the word to be added. For example, if I wanted to look at again, I'd say COVID and comma pneumonia, research term. Uh, it will give me what are the closest words in this joint space, which is NCP. Right. So the equation was COVID plus pneumonia. The closest word to that is NCP or NCIP. Right. So these are the kind of things, and then you can actually explore the data. That where are these studies that are coming from BMJ Nature, the Lancet Science, all these studies are actually used to create this analysis. All right, so I'll switch back to, instead of switching back, I'll just go forward to the next dashboard that we developed, which is called CoVision. So the CoVision dashboard actually is a dashboard for making projections of numbers for the government, for whosoever. That's something that we really care about. That when the lockdown opens, what will happen, right? So this is a log scale. So this might give you an impression that the pandemic is actually, of the epidemic in India is slowing down, which is not. If you look at the linear scale, it is actually increasing in the exponential scale. So we make predictions that how many cases are going to happen in the next few weeks in India. You can do that state by state for Delhi, Gujarat, whatever state, using different models. Some of these advanced models are called agent-based models, where you can actually simulate the effect of lockdown, testing, and contact tracing. Right, so the current best fits are available at, seems like our lockdown was about 65% and testing percentage was quite low, it was 50%, which may be different. But you can see that the lines were actually fitting very well on the predictions. And then there were also classical compartmental models, which you can play around with these parameters, look at Delhi models, and then perhaps see what these models look like in the long range, even with classical models, right? So what are the predictions and where are the actual numbers lying? So what's expected on May 31, what's expected on June 7, things like that. So far we have not been stabilizing or decreasing. So we don't know where the lockdown opens up, but these will be the models which will be hopefully relevant, because we also project what are the number of ICU beds that we will require, for example, in Delhi on these different days, dates, as per the model projections. And these are updated every day. So this is again, the paper is actually not submitted yet, but we have written the insights from these models as well, and how do we develop these. The third and last dashboard that I would like to talk about, and that will be the conclusive, I would say, application using AI, about sentiment. Actually, not about sentiment, it's about emotions. So AI is an COVID is an infodemic, and AI can help in understanding the infodemic as well. And emotion is something which is very complex to understand from language. We can understand sentiment using something called sentiment analysis, which is only three: that there's a positive sentiment, or there's negative sentiment, or there's a neutral sentiment. But in last couple of years, AI has helped us to also understand the emotion content of text. So we did something similar. We used a tool developed from Stanford, a pipeline developed from Stanford, which is called Empath. So I was a visiting faculty member at Stanford for a couple of years before joining IIIT Delhi, and we were working on NLP as well quite a bit. So I found this tool to be really impressive when we were working there. So we decided to try it out. And the idea being that there is government bulletins that are put out every day. And then there's tweets that people do on Twitter every day. We can extract the location of these tweets by the hashtags, for example, Delhi fights Corona, right? Or Punjab fights Corona, or Maharashtra fights Corona, right? Or some other location-based features, because Twitter only, I think about 5% of the Twitter is actually geo-tagged. So we looked at certain hashtags which clearly specify what the location is being talked about. And this database was about 5.3 million tweets all across India. We analyzed government bulletins using the empath analysis. So the empath analysis gives emotions such as this. That emotion may be relating to governance, in which case it will be government. The emotion may be relating to economics, or medical emergency, or health, or hygiene, fear, death, right? So you can see that, for example, for Delhi, the emotion about government is higher than India in general, right? And then you can actually look at West Bengal, where some other emotions, for example, things about fight or war or negative emotions were actually a little bit more than London. So basically what we saw, and then what we did was that which of these emotions leads. So a causal analysis to say, does Twitter emotion cause government bulletins to change their sentiment? Or does government bulletin change, cause a change in the Twitter sentiment? And that's another piece of a very interesting analysis called grandeur causality analysis, which has been used for a long time in time series. We do in our ICUs as well. That what causes what. It is used in stock markets. It is used in economics. That which time series was causing what caused some, for example, economic direction to fall. Which other thing caused it? So we did a analysis called grandeur causality analysis. Again, the preprint is out there. I'll talk about that. And we found that for emotions such as medical emergency and fear, the government bulletins were leading, which means they were causing the Twitter sentiment. So why do we do this?
Oh my God.
Because there's an infodemic that is associated with the COVID. We also want to understand: are we creating a panic in people as we go forward? And we need to really look at: are we creating the right messaging systems? Because once the lockdown opens, what is going to work is the right messaging systems to people, providing us with the right tools, messaging, for example, using Wash Karo in their own languages, audios, etc., contact tracing, and then behavioral changes, and then also ensuring that there is not enough, there's no panic created. That's why we created the psychometric analysis of Twitter. So I'll come back to the presentation, and I'll finish there. So yeah, so I just spoke about CoVision and how does it help us make projections. I also talked about CoVibes. So both these dashboards are online. They are publicly, openly available. So the dashboard which I just showed you is called CoVibes. It is also hosted on our lab webpage. And the preprint is also out there on medRxiv. We have submitted it to EMNLP, which is a natural language processing the venue. It talks about psychometric analysis and coupling of emotions between state bulletins and Twitter in India during the COVID-19 infodemic. So the right-hand side table is just a significance testing of what causes what. Does the government bulletin cause the tweet, or the tweet cause the bulletin emotion? That's the right-hand side. So I'll stop here. I think I've taken uh, a little less than an hour and leave the last 10 minutes for questions. So in fact, I would like to thank all my team. A lot of this team actually contributed to Washkaru. There are a few members who are not here who contributed to CoVibes and to the CoVision. So the team is actually expanded. A lot of students who are, all these are actually, most of these are bachelor students from different universities. They're triple IT students, but there's also, for example, SNU students. There's Microsoft engineers who volunteered. All these students are from AIMS or graduates from AIMS. And my colleague PK, who's a professor in computer science and runs a Precog lab. So you must have noticed that all the work that I showed here had these Precog and TOV lab symbols. So both of us actually work together in the COVID Action India space. So I'll stop here and take questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sethi, for your valuable and informative talk. I hope most of people, I mean, I can see the messages from people. People have really appreciated this talk. So I invite questions from participants, but I think Manisha is there who is going to read all the questions which are there in the chat box. Manisha? Hello, Manisha, are you there?
Good evening, everyone.
Yeah, you're not very clear. Your voice is not clear, Manisha.
Am I audible to you, ma'am?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Ma'am, sir, there is one question. Could any AI application have predicted that outbreak of novel coronavirus will turn into a pandemic?
That's a great question. So 7 days before WHO alerted, January 1st, I think that was January 1st, or January 7th. And 10 days before CDC alerted that there is going to be an outbreak, a company called Blue Dot, which is a Canada-based company, actually raised alert before WHO and before CDC that we are observing that an infection is spreading at a very fast rate. The Blue Dot company is run by a physician scientist. He's Canada-based. His name is Kamran Khan, and he's an epidemiologist. He is a clinician, and then basically and he has published papers in the Lancet. The Blue Dot company had predicted a similar thing for Ebola when that happened, for Zika. How did they do that? So they have tie-ups with the airlines, and they noticed that the travel data from airlines, even before the governments noticed anything, or governments started talking about anything, that airlines data started predicting that something was spreading very fast in the areas where airlines were more, where the connectivity was higher. And they had this airline data. One of the papers that are not shown today here, and that just skipped my mind because that came out yesterday on medRxiv, is a study that we did with the Cleveland Clinic about the spread of determinants of spread of COVID in the US, within the US, different states of US. And there also we find that the flights from that state directly to China, to Wuhan, were one of the most important predictors of deaths in that state. I can share the paper later. That's available on medRxiv. Just search my name. I'm not the first author. That's a Cleveland Clinic paper. The first author is Piyush Mathur. Last author is Frank Cappe. And I'm the second author. So, but the idea there being that if you had access to data, you could actually use AI to predict things about India as well, a lot before they would have happened. So you can look up the company called Blue Dot, which actually used AI on data, on non-conventional data, not epidemiological reported data, because we are still arguing about what is the correctness of epidemiological data, what is the reporting, what are the numbers, are they true, are they false? But there is so much contextual data available out there. If we could use that, we would be able to make a lot of prediction. That where will it spread, just like the Wash-Karo hypothesis, that it will spread to areas where water sanitation hygiene is low, which again, we have another paper in communication which talks about the hygiene hypothesis. I'm not going to talk about that, but there's so many different factors. And as I said, COVID is an enigma. We definitely need more data before AI to start predicting COVID or any pandemic.
Thank you, sir. So there is one more question.
Yes, please.
Am I audible?
Yes.
How can one use AI in teaching learning process in today's pandemic situation?
Sorry, so how can one use AI in?
Teaching learning process in today's pandemic situation.
There are a lot of tools out there, which actually a lot of companies again have come up. One of the simple themes there being customizing content for different audience. So, for example, if I want to create content for let's say an outreach area or let's say an aspirational district in India, I may want to keep that context to be delivered. That I don't talk about New York in that, right? So I talk about what is that district. So some of the companies which do that already have been doing that is to customize the content which is relevant to the context in which education is being delivered to improve learning. Second thing, for example, just as we did in Wash-Karo, to reach out in different languages, right? So how can we use AI for reaching out to people in their own languages? Can we really help them with better infographics? If you know about, that's a very, I would say, nascent field right now. It is no way perfect, but there is a field called generative adversarial networks, which can generate cartoons from text. So creating, for example, cartoons which will be contextual. If I'm reaching out to people in India versus people in Thailand, our visuals should also be different, right? So within India, visuals should also be different. So people can relate more. So all those aspects can be used to deliver effective education using AI during this pandemic.
Thank you, sir.
Hello,
There is one question.
Manisha, just a second.
Yes,
Dr. Sethi, we have our retired professor, Professor Verdi. I think he is there in the list of participants, and he's raised a question. Dr. Verdi, can you hear me? Hello, Dr. Verdi.
Yes, I can hear you.
Sir, most welcome. I just saw your name on the question list, so maybe you can just talk straight to Dr. Sethi.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, thank you, sir. We can hear you.
Yeah, you see, a very good presentation, Pritesh.
Thank you, sir.
And see, you have answered my question that it is possible to predict these kind of pandemics right in the first few weeks or maybe in the first month or so. But you said you need more data. See, but data you will get only when the infection is progressing as it goes more and more into duration. What my question is that, let's say in the case of the coronavirus, if it was predicted by some of these companies, as you mentioned, that it may turn into a pandemic kind of a thing, why their predictions were not heeded too? Is it that we are not very comfortable with these predictions as yet, or is it I'm really not able to understand why is it this kind of a conflict.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. That's a great question. I think it is even after. So the prediction actually came from, as you said, it did not come from epidemiological data as much. It came from flights data and people reporting that a new form of pneumonia has emerged and is actually crossing the nation's boundaries. So 7 days before WHO did that, when WHO said that we can see that there is a pandemic that has started, we need to take measures. Still, we did not take enough measures, even after WHO confirmed, to really stop this epidemic. And I think perhaps that is more of a social governance issue, that were we really prepared to deal with this epidemic? Because for a long time, for example, we kept believing that temperature may have a protective effect and we may be protected. For a long time we kept believing that there may be some genetic protection, but I think there was always this evidence that places which are warm, like Australia, where it was summers, or maybe if or Florida, they're not as warm as India, but places which are warm and still seeing infection rates, we really needed to get into action. I think, but that's true for most of the places. Look at US, how poorly it is actually managing the situation. I don't have an answer to why we did not pay heed to, even after when we started seeing that these are going up, the US has so badly dealt with the situation that so many lives lost. I think at some point of time we have just given up, and going forward, even with the lockdown situation, it's even more scary. Although people think that situation is probably, as we are opening the lockdown, I think situation is definitely more fragile than before the lockdown started. So you even need to be more careful with all these and pay heed to data. That would be my, I mean, even if you pay heed to data now and going forward, I think that's something that can help in preventing disaster.
Okay, Tafrish, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the explanation and the good lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.
And thank you, sir, for being part of this webinar. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Shashi. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, sir.
Okay.
Manisha, please continue.
Yes, ma'am.
So is there any other question, Dr. Manisha?
Yes, sir. There's one question regarding psychoanalysis of social media. Apart from Twitter, could Facebook data about the COVID sentiment could be analyzed?
So Facebook's policies have, because of obvious reasons, if you have looked at last year, Cambridge Analytica, and then all the testifying in the Congress that Facebook had to do, Facebook has become very restricted about using its data, restrictive about using its data. So that way it is much more difficult than it used to be before to work with Facebook data. That's a short answer, but yes, it can be used. But for that, you have to work directly with Facebook. They are extremely restrictive about the content, which is for obvious reasons, that the scandal that happened about with the Cambridge Analytica scandal that happened with Facebook coming into limelight. So it's probably because there's no scraping possible, or APIs are very difficult to do. So Facebook is a little bit more difficult platform to work with. I hope I answered that.
Thank you, sir. Sir, next question is, can the economic condition and the health condition of the people get connected via the AI app and the government gets the accurate information so as to help those in need with better healthcare?
So let me understand the question a little better. So can the economic condition of people be connected to, or is it economic condition of, let's say, districts or states? So can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, I missed a part.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sure, sir. Can the economic condition and the health condition of people get connected via the AI app and the government gets the accurate information so as to help those in need
Yeah, right.
with
So
better healthcare?
right. So I think that is definitely possible. But as I said again, um, the economic condition of people is mostly private information. Only the government is authorized to do that. And also at that level, I think uh, we can do that at maybe at a more. So one of the things that people actually care a lot about is to not do what is called privacy, trespassing the privacy right. So PII, the personally identifiable information, personal identifiable information. That's something that we so much care about in contact tracing as well. And I don't want to reveal that where did I go, or what is my status, or what is my economic condition, or so things like that. So I think at the PII level, it is best that some PII privacy should be maintained, to not reveal all that to anybody, be it whatever level of governance, because at at all we I mean so all databases are prone to cyber threats, to cyber security threats and hacking. So these are all sensitive questions. It's not easy, although we might think that it's easy to just put all the information about me, for example, on a central database with all my economy, all my health conditions, everything, my family, where I go, what do I do, so all that. But from the privacy perspective, even the government has to take care that that all that information has to be very securely managed. And those have been some of the controversies about what happened in the past couple of weeks, about controversies that came in. Some review, some picture about the Aarogya Setu, but they were very quickly plugged. Now it is open source; people can quickly identify. But theoretically, yes, but practically, no. It can be done at a more aggregated level, where you can say at a district level, what should be my policies for a district, for a poor district versus a rich district? Can I do something different? Or maybe even at a block level, tehsil level. But I don't think we should be thinking about at individual level, which is a very different ballgame. It can be done, but we should not be doing it.
Thank you, sir. The next question is, can AI be used in pandemic management, like in managing data connecting patients' needs to hospital bed ventilator availability?
Yeah, so one of the dashboards that I just showed you is called Covision. Actually does, you can all do AI-based predictions in the future, 7 days, 10 days, and then use those predictions to calculate what is likely number of patients that will actually require hospitalizations by going by the statistics that we know, and then how many of those by the currently known statistics actually end up on ventilator. So that's exactly what we did to calculate the number of ICU beds or ventilator usage in our current models. So short answer, yes. And many other models, for example, in the US, there's IHME models. Even in India, a company called BCG, it's not an Indian company, but that's helping the central government as well to do some of those projections.
Thank you, sir. There is one more question. Recently, an antibiotic was created through AI in US. How did that happen? And how can students in research field use AI in our future?
No, so students can actually, I think you at the undergrad or the grad time, it's the best time to really explore diverse areas using AI or data wherever it is possible. I think a lot of, so I don't know which antibiotic is being talked about, but for example, if you look at AlphaFold program, uh, Google's DeepMind algorithm to fold proteins uh, through crowdsourcing and then using AI to actually not crowdsourcing. So AlphaFold does not use crowdsourcing. Sorry about that. AlphaFold does de novo folding of proteins. So if you start thinking about that, AI is being used already in simulations of molecules and how would they look like, how would they dock with a certain receptor. So I think all those is already happening in AI. Unfortunately, AlphaFold did not make their algorithm public. So AlphaFold is the same. The background algorithm of AlphaFold is the same algorithm which defeated the human champion in Go, I think in 2016. Uh, and it was published on as a front page on Nature. The algorithm is called AlphaGo, developed by a company called DeepMind, which was then acquired by Google, and now it is Google DeepMind based in London. They did AlphaFold as well, which again made to the front cover of Nature. And then there are multiple examples where folding of antibiotics, folding of molecules has happened. So recently there was a paper in Nature Methods or Nature Biotechnology, I'm forgetting which, where they again used AI, reinforcement learning to fold molecules to be able to really predict can we create new molecules. So, short answer, yes. I don't know which antibiotic you're talking about, but in the drug discovery field, AI is used regularly. Students can get involved in all levels, molecular to public health, to NLP, Twitter, or to clinical data. I think the field is wide open, and you should be exploring AI in all this.
Thank you, sir. So there is one last question. It has been stated that 14,000 articles have been published on COVID-related issues. You have said that we can get a summary of some articles. Sir, can you tell more about that?
Right. So, so the idea behind I think now it is more than 40,000. The last time we updated the backend database, it was about a week back. So I can quickly visit the site. If you just type WHO database for COVID, it will tell you what is the current number. I'm suspecting it will be around 18,000 by now. At the rate it has been growing. When we started doing this work, there was only 4,000 articles. So so we don't summarize all the articles. What we do is we summarize. We pick up a word, for example, pneumonia. And in the word embedding space, which I showed the word cloud, not the word cloud, the word embedding space that you just saw, the word pneumonia will be used in subset of articles of that. And then what was that? What were those subset of articles? Can those be summarized in what? So what was that placeholder article? So for example, if I go to college with my friend, right, to the same class, and I go more often, I'm present more. So essentially, I can be a placeholder person for another person, right? So now if you summarize these articles from these numbers, you can actually find out which were the high ranking placeholder articles. By the way, that is a similar ranking that is done when you do a Google search. So it ranks, it's called the page rank algorithm. where it ranks the searches that which is the most relevant search. So if I have an important article, many other articles will pointing to me, right? So it's like something if many, it's just like H-index or I-index in publication. That if many important people are linked to me, then I automatically gain importance. So if many important articles are linked to a certain article, it automatically gains importance. And then you summarize that article using the extractive text summarization, as I said. So that is a process in which we summarize a large amount of literature into the most important summary measures, summary articles, or summary texts using AI. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Manisha. Thank you, Dr. Sethi, for answering all these queries which the participants had. I too have a small query to ask. There are times like I have Arogya Setu on my mobile phone now. I'm just giving you a situation. And
Right.
one family member of mine goes to hospital, like the person is a doctor. Now, there are times when they may or may not be exposed to the patients, the COVID patients. In that case, what do I mention in my app? At times, I'm really confused whether I'm exposed or not.
No, I mean, so unless there is a confirmatory test done, and the government, the authority to update the database, central database is actually with the government, as I said. So there's no, so you should not be saying exposed, because that may create a rippling effect in the algorithm, unless there is a proven contact whose test was positive, and a known family member or a person who you came in contact with was actually exposed. So unless that happens, we should not be labeling us as exposed.
Sir, but there are patients who visit the doctor and like they think they're suspected cases, like, and then they're referred to some other government hospital like RML or LNJP. So in
Right.
that case, these people in the other hospitals never try to keep a track on the patient. So we will never know whether the person was positive or not.
So so I think that's one of the reasons for enforcing the app, that uh, if a person came into an OPD
Right.
and the doctor was seeing that patient, and both of them had the Arogya Setu app on. So basically, this exchange of Bluetooth advertising using random addresses is still ongoing. So the central database does get updated, that which phone came in contact with which phone. So let's say if that phone went to some other doctor, hospital, RML or LNJP, whatever, and there they came out with positive. Ideally, and I'm assuming that's happening because I don't know what the central algorithm is. Ideally, as soon as a test came out with positive, all the previous contacts are also searched. All the previous 7-day contacts of those Bluetooth exchanges are also looked for, whether there was a contact, and then basically, for example, your relative or your family member, they should be updated that there was a contact that has happened. So that is the ideal contact tracing scenario,
Right.
which assumes that all people are using contact tracing, and the database is actually searching back in time, 7 days, and seeking at all times which contacts came out with positive.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sethi, for
You're
removing my confusion. And now I request Dr. Kriti Tyagi to please give vote of thanks.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. So as no duty is more urgent than that of returning thanks, so I am privileged to propose a vote of thanks formally on behalf of Microbiology Department and entire supporting team. First and foremost, I would like to give a heartfelt thanks to our speaker, Dr. Tavpritesh Sethi, for such a wonderful and excellent presentation, highlighting the importance of artificial intelligence in today's world, taking COVID-19 as an example. On a bigger picture, what I've understood is that artificial intelligence can be a tool in getting access to a key information at the right time that could actually be a game changer in one way or the other in critical medical situations. So I'm sure your talk would motivate many minds in pursuing the computational approaches to solve various issues in medical or allied sciences. Thank you for this informative and a great session, Dr. Sethi. Now, I would also like to express profound gratitude to our principal, Dr. Pramila Kumar, for giving us an opportunity and the platform to organize this webinar. I would also like to thank our teacher in charge, Dr. Shashi Chawla, for initiating this idea, for constant support and encouragement, and most importantly, I thank her for being accessible to us all around the clock. I'm thankful to our students organizing committee for enormous cooperation and support in making the event successful. I am appreciative to all our students for actively participating in the webinar amidst their ongoing exam schedule. I also extend my gratitude to wonderful audience affiliated to different universities and academic institutes for their enthusiastic participation. This is very encouraging to all of us. And also, Dr. Sethi, thank you very much for answering all the questions with so much of patience. Last but not the least, we have been fortunate enough to be backed up by very motivated and dedicated technical support, Mr. Anuj Bhardwaj. Thank you, Anuj. So once again, I extend my gratitude to all, and especially to our speaker, Dr. Sethi, Principal Dr. Kumar, and everyone who has managed to join us today. We shall be signing off now. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Priti. It was my pleasure to join in, and special thanks to the principal of Gargi College and to Dr. Shashi Chawla, and to all those who attended. It was a pleasure interacting with you. Thank you.
So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We should be signing off now. Thank you for being with us. Stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you.